Before we begin, I'd like to invite two partners to share important updates that are greatly benefiting our community. First, I'd like to thank GMC member Jill Pelisek for connecting us to our first guest, Brianna Canales, who will share information about the UWM Lubar School of Business Multicultural Mentoring Program. The Multicultural Mentoring Program connects diverse business students with business professionals to help them learn about work and career development from experienced business people. For the 2020 program, there are currently 47 students matched with mentors, with 15 students still seeking mentors. Many GMC members have participated in the past in this program, and we encourage you to consider it again for this year's program. Brianna, will you please tell us more about the program?
Of course. Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. As David said, my name is Brianna. I'm a student at UWM studying marketing, and I'm excited to be here today. This past year, I had the pleasure of being accepted into the Lubar Multicultural Mentorship Program as a mentee. David touched on it, that the program looks to build relationships between students and business professionals in order to help us navigate the real business world. It's taught through a plethora of things like networking, business professionalism, and just kind of increasing self-confidence. And truthfully, for me, there are so many ways the program influenced my life. I truly believe the commitment was both manageable and beneficial to the business professional I am becoming. And so today I want to mention the great aspects of the program through the lens of my experience. Firstly, as we all know, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of communications have shifted to just being virtual. But my mentor actually lived in Des Moines, Iowa, prior to all of this happening. So Des Moines and Milwaukee. So we honestly had to get familiar with virtual meetings pretty early on, and again, before all of this happened. And while meeting online can sometimes be tricky, it was actually pretty easy to meet all of the MMP requirements, and we actually got to meet in person a few times, and we grew an incredibly strong relationship through our mostly virtual connection. In fact, meeting virtually was pretty convenient to just get on a call or a Zoom meeting in between classes or before or after commitments that we had. Secondly, my mentor was young. She's actually in grad school, and she still brought so much knowledge, experience, advice, history, and encouragement to our relationship. She was also a completely different major than I am. I'm marketing and she is finance. So we still found so much to relate on, and that was pretty awesome, including the fact that we were both minorities in the business world. So no matter your age, race, major, I feel like there is something for people to bring to a student at UWM who needs help navigating the business world. Additionally, I have had countless opportunities come my way since my participation in the program, ones that I'm still just finding out about. So it's crazy how it's still influencing my life, even though it's been a few months since it ended. Some were because of my mentor's direct connections, and others were because of the knowledge that she passed on to me, as well as the people at the Lubar Multicultural Program. Knowledge like business etiquette, resume tips, interview skills, and by far my favorite part was like the real world experience that is talked so much about, because there are things that you can't learn in a textbook. You hear about them, but actually getting to be a part of them is so much different and so much more influential, like networking, increasing my connections on LinkedIn, all of those good things. And lastly, my mentor and I are still connected. I remember asking her if it was going to be something we would still be able to come back to even after the program came to a close. And she just said, this is a forever thing. So that was pretty awesome as well. And finally, I just want to say thank you for everyone's time today. I was told there have been several applications received within the last 2 weeks, so a gracious thank you to all of you who have already applied. The GMC newsletter that was sent out on behalf of Jill has increased our mentor applications by a great amount, so that's awesome. And thank you again.
Brianna, thank you very much. And it's really wonderful to hear that the program has had such a positive personal impact on you, as well as the others. And it's truly a great way for many first-year college students to gain real-life exposure to what happens in the business world and to learn from an experienced business person. So we are, Brianna, we're also sharing the link to this program in our newsletter, and we'll send out the invitation to your September orientation soon. So now for our second speaker, I'd like to introduce GMC member Amy Lindner, who's president and CEO of the United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County, to give us an update on the important annual campaign of the United Way. Amy?
Thanks, David. I'm really thrilled to be with all of you. We kicked off our campaign on September 3rd, and now we're in the sort of mad this year virtual dash through early December. Like any year, our campaign is vitally important for the nonprofits and people we serve throughout our 4-county footprint. But of course, this is not like any year. Our Safe and Stable Homes initiative to end family homelessness in our region by 2025 takes on added importance when people need a home to be safe in during a time of pandemic. Our new initiative, Reducing Barriers to Employment and Advancement, which aims to reduce African American unemployment in our region, takes on added significance at a time when unemployment numbers have been skyrocketing. For all of you already partnering with us, and I know that is so many people on this call, we of course want to say thank you and ask if you can consider whether this is a year where you might be able to do, your company might be able to do just a little bit more. For those of you who are not yet partnering with us, I could not ask for 4 better leaders to make the case on why we would love you to consider that than the 4 leaders you're about to hear from, our 2020 United Way campaign co-chairs. As Heather cues up that video for us, very short video, I'll just end by saying I invite you to reach out to me or any of these great co-chairs you're about to hear from for anyone with questions about any of our initiatives or how you might be able to partner to even deepen your engagement with our community. I know you guys already all do so much. So thank you, and thank you to everyone living united.
I love the work the United Way does in our Milwaukee community, and I'm proud to be a co-chair this year. You know, whether it's the work that they do in reducing barriers to employment and advancement, or the quick action they took in building the COVID-19 Urgent Relief Fund, the United Way steps up where we need them most. This year, I hope you'll consider making part of your gift a gift to the Community Fund. The Community Fund enables United Way to put their dollars where they feel there is the most need. We all have charities and nonprofits that we choose to support in our own way. But sometimes, some of the smaller agencies may not have the marketing or the notoriety for us to understand just exactly what they do in our communities. That's where the United Way steps in.
I support United Way's deep connection with and commitment to our communities, especially to the people who need us the most. From teen pregnancy to equitable health care, to improving childhood literacy, providing emergency food, or helping to keep older adults active, United Way listens and acts to address our community's most pressing problems. For example, United Way's Urgent Needs Fund has helped our community to respond rapidly to the twin crises of COVID-19, a deadly pandemic unlike any since the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, and a swift and debilitating economic downturn not seen since our Great Depression, both of which disproportionately affect people and communities of color. As a healthcare provider, I've seen firsthand the deep and profound impact the United Way has had on our most vulnerable people over the years, and especially throughout this pandemic. United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County is a trusted partner that brings together the best of who and what we are, operating with compassion, transparency, humility, and integrity.
We all have our reasons for supporting the causes and organizations that we do. United Way will allow each of us to provide better and further reaching support for these causes and organizations. United Way truly has something for everyone. And what's most impressive is that United Way has the tools, the people, and the capabilities to be at the forefront of identifying both the immediate needs, think COVID-19 Relief Fund and Equity, as well as the long-term initiatives needed in our community, safe and stable homes and reducing barriers to employment. At the same time, United Way maintains its support for those organizations that do good every day, providing much needed help to people in both Waukesha and Milwaukee County.
I've been involved with the United Way in both Waukesha and Milwaukee for more than 15 years, and I was thrilled when they asked me to co-chair this year's campaign. You know, the United Way affects the lives of countless people across our region, and I think it's in years like this, when a pandemic hits and our community is really in crisis, that the value of the United Way shines through in a way that is harder to see in a normal year. You know, there's nobody in our community that has the breadth of relationships and resources and understanding of the different parts of our community that the United Way does. And when emergency strikes like it did this year, the United Way has just responded in an exemplary way to make sure that this community is meeting the needs of its highest risk citizens. And so I'm just honored to be part of this organization. I'm honored to be helping to lead this year's campaign.
Having been a campaign co-chair, working with the member companies of the GMC was always a very positive and uplifting experience. And so I encourage you to be welcoming, as you always have been, when they reach out to you. So thank you, Amy. I'd now like to turn this over to Julia Taylor. Julia?
Thank you, David, and thank you, Amy. During such a difficult time, we greatly appreciate the resources that United Way continues to provide to our community. And we want to thank you, the co-chairs who've committed to ensuring the campaign's a success, including our next speaker, GMC member, Dr. John Raymond. Unfortunately, he's not able to be with us today live to give his COVID update, but he did record an update last evening, which we're going to share now.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Julia. I have two different stories to tell today because Wisconsin and Milwaukee are seeing somewhat divergent trends. Because I recorded this Sunday afternoon, I've used the data available to me from Sunday for Wisconsin and from Saturday for Milwaukee due to a reporting lag. If I could have slide 1, please, Heather. This slide shows the cumulative tests, or the number of people who have been tested so far as of yesterday in Wisconsin, is at 1.36 million, and in Milwaukee over 250,000. Of those, there are nearly 90,000 positive cases in Wisconsin and a little over 25,000 in Milwaukee. Now, the number of tests reported yesterday in Wisconsin was relatively light, with 7,735 reported tests. The testing capacity in Wisconsin has gone up significantly to 38,530 per day, with 89 laboratories currently testing and 25 planning to test. The daily positive tests in Wisconsin set a new high on Sunday with 1,582 positive tests and a 20.5% positivity rate, which also is a new high since testing has been widely available in Wisconsin. And both of these early indicators have been trending unfavorably in Wisconsin for about a month, but these unfavorable trends have accelerated significantly over the last 2 weeks. The 7-day average daily case rate continues to increase in Wisconsin, now at 1,142 per day. And of the 5 highest daily case counts, 4 occurred in the last 5 days. And as of last Wednesday, 65 counties in Wisconsin had high activity rates, including Ozaukee. 6 had medium activity, with only 1 county, Price County, reporting low levels of COVID-19 activity. And 16 counties were trending upward. 4 were trending downward, including Waukesha. Now, Milwaukee had 157 new cases on Saturday, with an 8.1% 7-day positivity rate average. Now, that's trending upward, and ideally, this should be substantially below 5%. So we're seeing somewhat different trends in Milwaukee versus the rest of the state, with Wisconsin trending unfavorably for the last month, with a clear acceleration of unfavorable trends in new cases and positivity rates over the last 2 weeks. But there are early indications that Milwaukee might also be taking an unfavorable turn. And that's not surprising, because we know that COVID-19 doesn't respect county lines or state borders. Next slide, please. The next slide covers the number of hospitalizations, which now are at 6,332 since the beginning of the pandemic, with a 7.1% cumulative likelihood of hospitalization if you're diagnosed with COVID-19. And this continues to decrease or to improve for 3 clear reasons. First, we're seeing a younger demographic of COVID-19 positive cases. We also have earlier and more broadly available testing and better supportive care. And thus far, the increases in new cases have not translated into more hospitalizations. Now, a 4th reason could be that mask wearing is causing a decrease in the viral inoculum, or the burden of virus that people take on when they become infected with COVID-19, resulting in a lower dose that might cause fewer, less severe symptoms. Now, in terms of Wisconsin hospitalizations yesterday, there were 313 inpatients, which is stable but down somewhat from a month ago, and 93 in intensive care units, also stable but down somewhat from a month ago. And recall that hospitalizations and ICU use are lagging indicators. Now, the ICU capacity remains stable at 326 immediately available beds, and our ventilator capacity has substantially increased to 1,962. Now, part of that increase is the way that we're reporting ventilators. Surge capacity now is also including ventilator capacity. So those would be repurposed ventilators in procedure rooms and operating rooms. Nevertheless, we have adequate capacity of ventilators. And in terms of personal protective equipment, the trends are clearly improving, with the most critical needs of gowns and paper masks. But those are less severe in terms of potential shortages than they were even a few weeks ago. Next slide, please. This slide covers deaths and other metrics, and there have been 1,210 COVID-19 related deaths in Wisconsin since the beginning of the pandemic, 417 of which occurred in Milwaukee. Now, the death rate is stable in Wisconsin and slowly declining to stable in Milwaukee. And recall that death is a highly lagging indicator. Now, death as a percentage of COVID-19 cases, what's called the case fatality rate, has been stable at 1.4%. But this has improved significantly since early in the pandemic. And I think there are 4 reasons for that. Again, the new cases are from a younger demographic. We focus very, very stringently on congregate living and working situations. We have earlier testing and better supportive care. And deaths, like the number of newly diagnosed cases and positivity rates, do disproportionately affect people and communities of color, as demonstrated in the table on this slide. Now, I'm not going to go over each line, but I do want to note some trends that we've been tracking over the last 3 months. When examining total deaths, there's been an increase in the percentage of deaths in white and Hispanic individuals, and decreasing percentage of deaths in Black and African American individuals. Now, this is not surprising because the new cases have been trending toward white and especially Hispanic populations for the last 3 months. The doubling time yesterday in Wisconsin was 45.3 days and 77.4 days in Milwaukee. Now, this seems somewhat promising, but what it actually means is that without a change in the rate of growth of the pandemic, we'll have 89,000 more cases in Wisconsin by late October and 25,000 more cases in Milwaukee by mid to late November. The 7-day mean growth rate in Wisconsin is 1.4%, and I would note that this is trending unfavorably. The rate in Milwaukee is 0.4%, and that's stable. The reproductive number also is trending unfavorably in Wisconsin at 1.14 and stable to favorable in Milwaukee at 0.89. And again, ideally, we'd like to have that be substantially below 1.0 to decelerate the pandemic. If I could go to the next slide, please. This slide compares the 7-day mean reproductive numbers, which is a measure of contagiousness, since early March for Milwaukee in gold and Wisconsin in blue. Now, starting from the left, you can see that we took a troubling turn in mid-June with reproductive numbers climbing over 1.0 for 40 consecutive days, both in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin. And the Milwaukee mask ordinance went into effect on July 17th. And a few days later, the 7-day average reproductive number in Milwaukee dipped under 1. That reproductive number has remained at or below 1.0 in Milwaukee for the last 6 weeks. Now, Wisconsin also dipped under 1 for a while, but the reproductive number has crept up significantly for the last 3 weeks in Wisconsin. Next slide, please. This next slide shows a graph of the trajectory of COVID-19 by plotting new cases in the last 7 days on the vertical axis against cumulative cases since the beginning of the pandemic on the horizontal axis. The plot is presented using logarithmic scales to emphasize changes in trajectory. For this type of plot, downward movement is good and indicates a deceleration of the pandemic. Now, Milwaukee is shown in pink and the rest of Wisconsin in light blue. As you can see, Milwaukee had shown a clear downward or favorable trend for about 6 weeks, coinciding with the Milwaukee mask ordinance of July 17th. The rest of Wisconsin has not seen a favorable trend as COVID-19 has spread throughout the state. In southeastern Wisconsin early, then to northeastern Wisconsin, and then throughout the state. And early in the pandemic, the burden of COVID-19 clearly was here in southeastern Wisconsin, but I must emphasize that it has spread through virtually every county of the state. Now, Milwaukee's favorable trend, unfortunately, appears to have stalled for about the last 5 days. Although it's difficult to appreciate that on the graph, we're no longer seeing a downward trajectory of this pandemic trajectory. If I could go to the next slide, which is the last slide. Now, this summary slide just shows you some of the key indicators. The reproductive number in Wisconsin is 1.14, and the positivity rate over the last 7 days is 14.1%. The R number is 0.89 in Milwaukee with a positivity rate of 8.1%. And recall that we want the R number to be below 1 and the positivity rate to be substantially under 5%. The 7-day average of daily new cases also has reached new highs in Wisconsin at 1,142 on average over the last week, and 105 in Milwaukee, but this is also increasing. On the other hand, intermediate indicators are stable, with plenty of hospital beds, plenty of ICU beds, perfectly adequate ventilator capacity, and an improving PPE supply. And interestingly, the most lagging and most important indicator, death, the rate is still stable in Wisconsin, and it's been trending to a very slow decrease to stable numbers in Milwaukee. I do want to anticipate one question about why cases might be increasing and whether those are secondary to a return to school. I think the answer to that question is that some, but not all of the increase is from a return to colleges and universities. And I think a good example of that is what's happening in Dane County at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. However, with a high burden of disease in nearly every county of the state, this spread is more likely due at least in part to the penetration into the entire community and not just return to school. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Julia, and thank you for your kind attention.
So just to give you an update on economic prosperity area, Skill Up Milwaukee is hosting, and it actually starts tomorrow, the 4th round of Spark with 106 applicants. They were able to pare it down, even though it was difficult, to 26 minority and women-owned companies to participate in this Business Accelerator program. It's designed especially for Black, Latinx, and women-owned businesses with under $1 million of revenue, and it's funded by JP Morgan Chase. We know that Black and Latinx demographics were the hardest hit by COVID pandemic in both health outcomes, but also in business losses. In addition to the current Spark curriculum, this cohort's going to spotlight some particular concerns, including the digital divide and helping companies look at new marketplaces that they can use to succeed in. The program will be virtual, offering the safest and most effective way for entrepreneurs to participate. And we expect these companies to match or succeed the historic 40% growth of Spark alumni. In innovation and talent, the Commons wrapped up a very strong virtual summer internship and provided over 120 Wisconsin students of all ages from 50+ schools the opportunity to work on multidisciplinary teams to build innovative solutions to real-world problems while engaging in meaningful networking, professional development, and community activities. Building off of their learnings from this summer, the Commons team is working with academic and community business partners to launch a virtual career accelerator to continue to support motivated talent as they ask themselves critical questions like, what's next for me? What do I need to do to get there? Who can help me along the way? You know, and as we know, this is a particularly difficult time for students, as we're going to hear later in the reports. We know that this robust learning experience connects students to real-world work, career exploration opportunities, industry mentorship, and to themselves. The Commons looking for interested partners to help source and support talent in the program. If you'd like to learn more, please contact Michael Hostad, and I think that information's up on the screen. The Milwaukee United Displacement Fund is getting ready to launch the 2nd year of the pilot program. We're focusing on supporting long-term and low-income households in areas seeing indicators of displacement in our greater downtown. The first year saw 88 homeowners receive property tax benefits from the fund. If you're interested in joining the number of members who have supported this great effort to enable homeowners to stay in place, contact MKE United Director Tony Panciera. And finally, the GMC continues its commitment to becoming an anti-racist organization. We're in the process of forming a racial equity task force co-chaired by GMC members Cecilia Gore and Wayne Morgan. Thank you to both of you. The YWCA's Unlearning Racism is open currently for its next round of classes starting September 22nd until November 10th. We had 7 GMC members participate in the last round of classes, and I think everyone found it very valuable. If you're interested, you can contact Samantha Giles in our office, and we can help you register as we're starting a 2nd cohort. The program's almost full, so call soon if you're interested. And then President Eve Hall from the Milwaukee Urban League, our own GMC member, Eve, will host a virtual town hall meeting along with National President Mark Morial on the state of Black America Unmasked, a report with Professor Mark Levine on Thursday, September 24th from noon to 1:30, and the registration information is on the slide.
Okay, great. So for today's program, we welcome 4 esteemed leaders of our region's higher educational institutions. Dr. Michael Lovell, President of Marquette University, Dr. Vicki Martin, President of Milwaukee Area Technical College, Dr. Mark Mone, Chancellor of University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and Jeff Morin, President of Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. Most of us on this Zoom call grew up believing a college education was the key to a rewarding, successful life. College is where we would gain knowledge, skills, a network of friends and alumni, and a degree that would be our ticket to job and career opportunities and financial security. In the US alone, there are thousands of undergraduate and graduate higher education institutions, be they public, private, nonprofit, for-profit, large, small, 4-year, 2-year, urban, suburban, rural, religious, non-religious, and so on. In the greater Milwaukee area, we have well over 24 institutions and over 140,000 students. However, today, U.S. colleges and universities face more challenges, problems, and existential risks than ever before, including declining enrollments because of demographics, skyrocketing student debt, decreased state funding, lower graduation rates, lower world rankings, fewer foreign students, and now COVID-19. So there's a lot that these schools are addressing, and I have a series of questions that I will pose to the panelists. Let me begin with a question that I'd like each of the panelists to address, and that is, given the challenges I just enumerated, what are the determinants or the factors or the programs or the competitive advantages that you have that form the basis for your future success? And what resources do you need, be it from the GMC, from the state, from your alumni, from your students, from wherever, in the years ahead in order to be successful? So on my screen, Mike Lovell is the first. So let me go first Mike, then Vicki, then Jeff, and then Mark. Mike?
Okay, well, thank.
It's a big question, and
yeah.
So I hope you all have big answers.
Yeah, we'll do our best to provide an answer, but still be concise, so we don't take up all the time with the first question. You know, obviously, as you alluded to, higher ed faces many challenges, and I will just say, in my lifetime of being in higher ed, it's never been a more difficult time to be leading an institution with all of the forces acting against us. When I think about Marquette, you know, first and foremost, what is important to us, what are the determinants of our competitive advantage? It really is our Catholic and Jesuit identity. You know, we're part of a Jesuit network which was founded 475 years ago by St. Ignatius, which really focuses on a couple of things. One is being, you know, academic excellence, and the other is service to our community. And so those two things really are a differentiator for us. It's really our brand which we focus on. And so with the academic excellence, you know, we have been a top 100 university for decades, you know, and in the country, we remain so today. And so we want to continue focusing on that academic excellence. And that includes things like focusing on, you know, our instruction, the way we transform our students, having small class sizes. For example, 84% of our in-person classes this semester are 20 students or less. And those are things that are really important to us. Also focusing on programs where we know students will have jobs going into the future and are important to society. Things that are health sciences and nursing, data science, and computer science, and bioengineering. And those types of programs are things that we want to focus on, both on the education and research aspects of remaining competitive. And finally, you know, what do we need going forward? And I will just say the most important thing I believe, you know, for all of our institutions going forward is finding others to collaborate with. When I think about some of the most successful things we've done in recent times, it's been through unique partnerships. And I can point to, for example, our data science program with UWM and Northwestern Mutual. I think that is it's a great program for Marquette students and faculty, UWM students and faculty, Northwestern Mutual, but I think the broader community, we can create kind of this technology hub around data science and computer science that I think will help the whole region. I think about a partnership we have around biomedical engineering with MCW. That program, that joint program, recently we just got the research numbers for this year, and by far that is the most successful research endeavor we have on our campus in that area, in that space, and due to the partnerships we have. So as we think about going forward, knowing the many challenges we face, the one way to mitigate those risks is by collaborating with each other, both institutions of higher ed, but also our corporate partners.
Thank you, Mike. Vicki?
Well, thanks very much for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share what our competitive advantage is. I think you started out by talking about all the challenges we face, and I am here to say I think people can still have faith and trust in the products and the services that we offer, the education that we deliver. It's really important for our community. That's what our mission is based on. It's rooted in the local needs based on jobs available and needed by our employers in the community that we serve, which is Milwaukee County, Ozaukee County, and a little bit of Washington County with Germantown. But we are really offering crucial, affordable, and accessible education. And you mentioned student debt, so that becomes a really important piece. We're also comprehensive in that we have a transfer program. So I'll start with, we have open access admissions. What we have done as well is we have removed the barrier of, we used to have an admission fee, and now we don't have that anymore. And we used to use high stakes testing to place students into math and English, and now we use multiple measures. We have 4 campuses who are accessible. We have 2 learning sites. We have over 30 community-based organizations in which we participate with our education, so we get into the community and offer that. But now we share something common, which is the internet platform, of course. Our affordable education is free for eligible students through our Promise program. We offer it direct from high school, and for adults who have some college but are returning to finish up a credential or a degree. We are a less expensive path to our 4-year degree partners. So if you start with us, you can save a lot of money, get a quality education, and then you can transfer. We have guaranteed transfers with Marquette, UW-Milwaukee, UW-Madison, Parkside, and Green Bay. We've also launched a Center for University Partnerships and Studies on campus. So with Lakeland University and others, we're reaching out to all of our 4-year partners, so students really understand the value of lifelong learning. I would also like to say that we offer over 170 different programs really designed for middle skills. That's what's in high demand right now. More than a high school degree is needed, but less than a 4-year right now. And so we are uniquely positioned to offer those programs that are high value to our employers and to our community and are desperately needed right now. Small class sizes, as Dr. Lovell had said, we also offer customized and on-site training because we know that folks need to upskill during this time as well. We have over 30 years of experience of online instruction. In fact, we were one of the first colleges to begin to offer online instruction. And for us, enrollment is really a driving factor. And you mentioned enrollments are down. We were luckily able to get our enrollments up for summer. We are still working on our fall enrollment to stay on track. So we're starting to offer more 8-week courses, 12-week courses. We're starting to think about some rolling admissions. What we need is really a lot more state support for the kinds of programs that we offer, and also for emergency funds for our students as well. So many of our students are really economically disadvantaged, first generation, and they desperately need the support from our community and from our state. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Jeff Morin.
David, thanks very much for bringing this group together today to have this conversation. My ed story is different from much of what the national story is on higher education. Over the last 5 years, our enrollment has increased by 50%, and we set another enrollment record this fall in this extremely challenging time. And the way that we're doing that is that we are looking at these challenges as opportunities, and we are tying the challenges and opportunities to our strategic plan. So MyEd as an institution is a very planful institution. We are looking primarily to really solidify our program recognition in the Midwest and grow a national organization or a national institution moving forward, which is how the institution is growing today. We're mindful of the cost of education, which is why we're putting a lot of effort on retention, because we firmly believe that if a student leaves college, whether it's MyEd or any other institution, before they graduate, what they've left with is primarily debt and no way to manage that debt or to reduce that debt down through a profession. So we tend to be very focused on our corporate partnerships and business partnerships in the region and beyond. We're also focused on what I'd call ecumenical programming, in that our fairly new innovation center and emerging technology centers, both are not tied to majors. They're really geared for students who are entrepreneurial by nature, whether they're first year students or graduating seniors who want to launch a product, launch a service. All of that work can happen as they're progressing on their degree paths. We're getting ready to do a couple of things like launch a few more academic programs, and we're in the process of doubling the size of our faculty. And as we double the size of our faculty, that is factoring heavily into our equity and inclusivity plan moving forward. So that's what's happening at MyEd today.
Well, thank you. You're definitely busy. Mark Mone, UWM.
Thanks, David, and good afternoon, everybody. A real pleasure to be here with my esteemed colleagues. You know, the nice thing about going last is a lot of things have been said, so I won't try to duplicate those. I do want to acknowledge, of course, you know, many things around partnerships and so forth, but some of the unique aspects facing UWM. I'd start with, you know, this issue of agility. And I think what you've heard from all campuses certainly overcomes the concept that higher ed cannot change quickly. I think we've demonstrated that with the way we've pivoted in great ways. But when I think about our 25,000 students across 3 different campuses, I think about the leaders at all levels. Historically, we've had deans and administrators that have really been driving the operations. But today, based on COVID over the last 6 months, we have relied upon hundreds of people from faculty and staff roles to step up, whether it's in facilities, whether it's in emergency and safety planning, whether it's around the online increased resources. So that's really been, I think, a differentiator for us. And when you talk about what's going to enable success and survival in the future, I think it's not just being able to do the things in a quickly pivoted manner, but truly to differentiate the quality when we think about the online environment. So I think about our Center for Education, Technology, and Learning, where we've won a number of national awards for our online programs. The fact that we've got over 10,000 students historically online across our campuses. Today, virtually everybody in some form or fashion. So expertise in that. I think issues around student centricity, having that focus, very much like what Dr. Martin and Dr. Lovell and really ultimately Jeff talked about in terms of the focus on the students and their changing needs, their changing requirements, employers changing expectations. Those things are absolutely critical. When you ask the part about how can we be helped, what are the areas in which GMC members and their organizations can support, I'd offer up 4 or 5 different categories. Number one, the federal funding from CARES was absolutely a lifesaver. Half of that went right to our students. The other half went to our institutions, which of course is for the benefit of students. But that type of support, as well as future state support from which all our organizations can benefit, is critical. I can tell you over the last decade, there has been a public disinvestment in higher education in Wisconsin relative to not only all surrounding Midwestern states, but really nationally. That doesn't bode well for the future of the workforce. I think about our 190,000 alumni, over 80% of whom represent your employees. And I say your employees, GMC wide. You know, this is our future we're talking about when we have that kind of disinvestment. So there's that type of federal and state support. There's direct support that so many of you have been so helpful in terms of direct philanthropic support, scholarships helping us all fit our emergency needs that our students so desperately need. I had a student email me yesterday, you know, I don't have a computer. Do you still have those low-cost computers? I can't continue. Can you imagine today in an online environment not having a computer? So we've got great resources thanks to so much help. Third category would be your advocacy, helping us in terms of all the different policies and support. And then finally, issues around board consultative approach, the types of advising that so many of you do, what Jill Pelisek was able to talk about and programs she's helped develop in the Lubar School of Business, the types of things around whether it's minority entrepreneurship programs or whether it's around mentoring, cultural development. Those are things that are critically helpful. Thanks.
Well, thank all of you. So for my next question, you've all come together along with other higher ed institutions to create HERA, which is the Higher Education Regional Alliance. Mark, you're chairman of HERA. So this question is directed first at you. Can you explain what HERA is and why it's important to educational institutions, and who else should be interested in HERA and what you're doing?
Great, thank you, David. You know, I think this is probably one of the most important educational initiatives that we've seen in this region, if not in a long time, if ever. This is an initiative, when we talk about the Higher Ed Regional Alliance, this is unprecedented to have 18 two-year, four-year, public-private higher ed institutions working together around 3 goals. Keep in mind, there's a strong equity lens. We're really trying to lift everybody in this region. The recognition, first and foremost, is where we have goal 1, which is around college completion. And you've heard every single one of us talking in different ways about the importance of getting students through. This region and this state lags the national averages, and we have a specific goal that by 2025, we want to have at least 60% of this region to have 2-year, 4-year, or significant completion in a recognized certificate type of program. That's going to put us in a very competitive stance. It's also going to help acknowledge a lot of individuals who are left behind, the achievement gap notably. So there's a major initiative that's going to be announced later this month called the Moonshot for Equity. And so we're really focusing deliberately on bringing everybody up across this region. The second goal is around innovative partnerships. So earlier, Dr. Martin talked about the transfer as a transfer institution. We get the largest number of institutions from any other academic institution from MATC, but there's a lot of 4-year institutions that do not have deliberate partnerships that work as effectively, and that's an impediment. So employers come to us and say, I've got a 2-year student at a WCTC or at a Gateway, but they can't go on to one of the 4-year educational institutions to become an engineer, police officer, nurse, name the field, because the credits don't transfer. It's going to take them an extra 3 or 4 years. Why did they start at that lower cost alternative? So we've employed transferology as a very specific tool. So this is an example of the innovative types of programs, and there's many more that we are working on. A third goal is around strengthening the employer and higher ed linkages. You have a lot of employers in the region that don't hire across all the institutions. But David, as you pointed out earlier, there's over 140,000 students in this region, a lot of them that are not dialed in, they're not aligned as effectively with the employers. Meanwhile, employers, what have we heard for the last 10 years? I don't have enough talent. I don't have the talent where and when I need it. So let's bring those together. So we've engaged in Purple Briefcase, Handshake, other technology-assisted tools so that students can find employers, employers can find students. So all together, we've created trust, we've created great networks, and an awful lot of powerful things. And my colleagues I know can talk at length about the advantages and the value added for this region for higher ed working together as compared to some of the silos and competitive nature that historically has marked the region.
Well, thank you, Mark. So let me build on that in terms of the needs of today's students compared to 5, 10, and 20 years ago. And HERA, and you talked about the needs of the business community. So this is a question for each of you in terms of the programs, the classes, and the partnerships that your institution has to meet the current needs. What are they? What are the, you know, the really big partnerships and needs of the students? And based on current trends, where do you see this going over the next 3 to 5 or 7 years? So let me begin with Jeff, then Vicki, then Mike, and then Mark.
Well, first of all, anyone who's been in higher ed for 5, 10, or 20 years, as you mentioned, knows that the student body is changing and changing dramatically. We see some of that in the public eye today with conversations about social justice and equity. We see a level of both fragility and confidence that students today exhibit. Mental health issues amongst students today is a much more public and larger conversation. And for a lot of our students, they don't have necessarily the career aspirations that we had 20 or 30 years ago, where we may have been tethered to a field or a particular employer for the duration of our careers. So how is MyEd dealing with this? How is MyEd working with our incoming students? As I mentioned before, one of our programs that we started within the last couple of years is the Innovation Center. That's an opportunity for students to learn about everything from monetizing their creative product to intellectual property rights. It's also a service that is open to the local community, to the for-profit and nonprofit community as far as partnerships, whether it's developing communication design pieces, interior architecture pieces, product design work, or public art work. All of that work can be run through the Innovation Center, which assembles teams of creatives who want to be working out in the community. We have corporate sponsors that we work with regularly, everything from the folks at Collectivo to 889 to Carmex have all been partners on projects that we have committed to with them. We're also, as an outward-facing institution, taking the conversation about equity and inclusion seriously, and we joined an initiative called Greater Equity 2030, which is coming through Greater Together, and that's to increase the diversity in the creative workforce in Milwaukee with good research behind the goals that have been set. So in the next 5 years, we're looking to meet industrial needs. We're looking to broaden our curriculum. And again, speaking back to success for students, what Vicki mentioned, what Mark mentioned, we're focusing on retention so that students can graduate and can enter the professional fields.
Thank you, Jeff. Vicki?
Well, I can honestly say that because I've been at METC 30 years, I actually can go back 30 years if we need to, but I won't. I won't do that. But I have to say that the major changes that I've seen over my career are that our students, especially at METC, are much more diverse. About 58% of our students are students of color, and we are the most diverse two-year institution in our state. So we have seen some changes linked to that as well. But that is definitely a result of our community and what we've put out there in terms of some of our programs with our key partners, especially around the Promise program, where we had, it was a public-private partnership with our funders as well as Milwaukee Public Schools, which then, of course, brings me to our M-Cubed partnership with UWM and MPS and us, and as the 3 large urban public institutions, we have really seen the fruits of our work of really streamlining our processes and our systems, but also our outreach to students and looking at curriculum, looking at parent institutes, all sorts of different initiatives to really help students to understand about continuing their education as well as an early college program. That's the biggest change we've seen as well. I think more and more students starting college earlier. not just taking AP courses, but actually taking college credit courses, sometimes on campus, sometimes continuing at their high school. For two-year colleges around the country, that has been a steady stream of students for us, is really starting them on an early path. And that's been really important. The other piece is technology. All of our students have phones, but they don't necessarily have the other kind of technology, the Chromebooks or laptops that they really need to do the work. And so social media has taken on a different kind of importance, and just to change the way we communicate with students. Some students are taking gap years, especially a gap year, especially now, given COVID. They don't necessarily want to be online, they want to be in person, which is one of the things that I know many of our students really appreciate. But we're working with Milwaukee right now to create a 3-year credit gap year experience for them, learn more about the city, about their career, and so forth. Also, I've seen our students just expect on demand. Everything has to be now, on time. And so that's really changed our thinking about how we offer courses, what that looks like in terms of even financial aid and some of the other pieces that they need. How do we deliver the service they need when they need it? That also goes for employers as well. The employers that we work with, each of our programs has an advisory committee. We have over 1,000 members from our community, from the different business areas, that serve our programs to help us develop our curriculum, tell us what kind of technology is needed. And as you can imagine, that's being upgraded continually. The pace of change is so rapid. It's very hard just to even keep up with all the changes that are happening. More and more students are looking for stackable credentials. They want just-in-time credentials that employers are requesting and are needed. So goal 2 of HERA, part of it is looking at badges and what are employers looking for in terms of critical thinking or even cultural competence badges, just putting those together. And so you're really building a degree skill by skill, and that I think is what's going to be different. I think what we're starting to see, and I think what a trend's going to be in the future, is you're going to go to work to earn a degree. That the world of work and the world of our world of education is going to merge and be much stronger, so that you can be earning credits as you're working, that a lot of the work that you're doing, you're going to get credit for that learning, for current learning and for prior learning as you go forward. I think the other thing is the mindset has really, really changed. We used to, and I was one of those people like 20 years ago who was like, oh my gosh, if our high schools just did a better job, or if we had more support, and students were just coming to us and they were a different kind of student, we would be so much better. We'd have much better research and outcomes and all of those things. And as it turns out, we had to actually change us, and we had to change our systems, and were we student ready? And what we found out is no, we weren't. And so we changed a lot of our internal systems and processes. We just finished reorganizing to really focus in on the student experience and what is that really all about. And looking at Georgia State University and seeing what they have done, because I think they've demonstrated to us that it is possible, and you really have to just change the way that you do things. I just think that the other thing is these public-private partnerships are so important. All of our 4-year partners through HERA is really just a really important piece, as Mark just mentioned. And just our business partners are really critical, as well as our community-based organizations. And we just really need to figure out how not to duplicate what we currently have, because it's just so important that we figure out how to streamline things for students, make it easier, and work with employers a lot more closely. So thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Well, I think my colleagues, Vicki and Jeff, have done a great job of outlining. I might just maybe add a little more flavor some of the things that they said. When you think about today's student body and what the future of student looks like, is much more diverse, as we know. And even here at Marquette, our student body, we have 30% students of color and 20% faculty of color, which both are historical highs for us. And those numbers just keep going up. And as our student body and our faculty change, we need to ensure that those individuals are welcome and supported. So we need to think about their experiences on our campuses and what support mechanisms and what facilities and what program we put in place to ensure that they are being successful. And so I think that is one of the needs. I think all institutions, as we become more diverse, how are we supporting that more diverse student body? The second thing that Jeff mentioned really is true around mental health. And for those of you who are not aware, students today feel under more stress than any time in our history as a country, college students. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You mentioned some of them around the student debt and all, and many of the things that they face and challenges they face. I also think the conversation is much greater around mental health. So how do we support our students when we know that 1 in 3 college students in this country are seen for mental health illness each year? So that's 1 in 3 students. We have to help them navigate and work on their overall health and wellness when they're stressed out. The other thing is this student body, and this goes a little bit to what Vicki mentioned, that they think and act differently than maybe we did when we were in school, or even 10 or 20 years ago. When I think about when I was in school, I wanted to get to point A to point B to point C as fast as I could. I knew my direct path to graduation, and I wanted to get out. Well, these students, it's very important for Gen Zs to get a whole field of experiences rather than just getting through the curriculum. So things around innovation, entrepreneurship, building things like our 7 Innovation Hub, where students can start their own business they want. These study abroad programs, they want internships. It's really, they want to gather a bunch of experiences so they know what they want to do once they graduate and move forward, going forward. As Vicki mentioned, this is really the now generation. This is the students that grew up with iPads, in their cribs, and so they are looking, really to, have everything they want available to them today. And so as we think about what we offer them, it really is that whole broad set of experiences that round out what they believe is the kind of education they want. The final thing I would say, one of the needs they have is that, 65% of children in primary school today will work in jobs that don't exist. And so how do we help our students, have the ability for lifelong learning so that they can constantly, as Vicki said, go through these badges and retool themselves as they go through their career, because we know that technology continues to move at unprecedented paces. And that just means the jobs of the future are much different than they are even today. And so we need to equip them with the ability to be able to learn going into the future so that they can adapt to the changes that they will face in the workforce.
Well, thank you all for those insights. Let me switch gears a little bit and to COVID-19. Obviously, we've been operating under it for the last 6 months and will be for a while to come. So, and I also understand some of you may have worked together on your plans for dealing with COVID-19. But the question is, what is your institution's plan for dealing with COVID-19? Students are not known for social distancing. We see that more and more all the time. I think they've proven it. And not all classes can be virtual. So what does it take in terms of rules and enforcement, along with facilities, technology, and staff to deal with COVID-19? So that's a question for each of you. And who'd like to go first here? Mark?
Happy to answer it. And I could add a little to that last question, but I'll work it into some of the other issues that I think are highly relevant. In the COVID world, I have to tell you, I think we've all pivoted. You're going to hear how we've done so much online today, about 60% online, hybrid about 20%, and the remainder in person. So one of the big ways we're trying to deal with this is mitigation. We're not trying to have everything face to face. We've planned for months. Our university housing, we're at about 46% of normal. What that means is we have 1,900 students instead of the normal 2,200 to 2,300 on campus. We've got mandatory masks. We've got a lot of our employees working remotely wherever possible. We have a campaign, and one of the biggest things we're trying to do is create a culture of safety and health. David, to your point about students are not known for behaviors that are necessarily the safest. 18 to 25-year-olds are going to do what they're going to do. So we're really trying to engage our students, having our student leadership engage, have senior class students talk to underclass students and talk about, what's smart behavior? What do you do on weekends? Things that we might feel on campus, we can control, we can have that safe environment, but what happens off campus? What happens when students who are in residence halls go to parties or go to Water Street and North Avenue? We do have in place a lot of training. We've got attestation for students and for our employees that are required to sign that daily. We have 2 different types of testing practices in place. All summer, we've been testing in our health center using the gold standard, which is called a PCR test. That's for symptomatic students. We have been employing lately an antigen test, which is more of the broad surveillance, asymptomatic testing. And our capabilities that are ramping up right now, in the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to test every other week. Basically in total, every 2 weeks, we'll be able to test every student in our residence halls. And then we're encouraging our employees and students off campus to use either the Norris Health Center if you're a student, or your healthcare provider's testing. We are ready. We're monitoring this closely. You've heard yesterday about UW La Crosse, last week UW-Madison. We've seen nationally where a lot of campuses have to pivot. We think that with our health plan that we've been sharing broadly with all our campuses across the region, we think we're going down the path as carefully as we can, realistically. But this pandemic, as we know, this virus has a mind of its own. It does things that we cannot entirely control. So we've just done a lot of different things, physically, behaviorally, culturally, to really try to work on this. In the neighborhoods, both MPD and our own police department have been pretty active in communication, pretty active with education programs. We're really trying to create, again, that culture. We're keeping our fingers crossed an awful lot.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I have a hunch most of us are going to speak about the same types of protocols that we've put in place to make our buildings and our programs as safe as possible. The one thing that I'd like to focus on is the issue of digital equity, because it's something that we were aware of pre-COVID, that access to technology really does go hand in hand with access to success, and that access was uneven. Moving all online in the spring, as most of us had to do, really magnified that issue. And creating a system in the fall that allows students to succeed, whether they're on campus or wholly online, has really caused us to focus a lot of effort and resources on digital equity. When we polled our students at the beginning of the summer about how many of them wanted to be on campus, not surprising, 95% of our students wanted to be on campus. We're a college of makers. We want to be in the labs. We want access to the facilities that are here on campus. 2 weeks before the fall semester started, 45% of our students wanted to be online, because the anxiety and the fear really began to kick in for students as we got closer to move-in date. So we had to make sure that we could offer both an on-campus experience and an online experience in a parallel fashion. And we've had to do everything from sending Wi-Fi hotspots out to our students, to helping our students acquire internet access in their home area, to mailing them or expressing them technology like laptops or tablets, to also creating a cloud-based computer lab that allows us to run really robust software that can be accessed by inferior computers. Quite frankly, computers that normally couldn't run AutoCAD, for instance. They were too old, they didn't have the horsepower. So we've invested in a virtual online computer lab environment so that students, even with poor technology at hand, can complete the coursework. And we know that the aspect of digital equity is not something that's going to go away the day after COVID goes away. So that's going to be much more front of mind for us moving forward as we deliver our programs.
Thank you. Vicki?
Yes, well, very similar. Got to see the digital divide in real time, just as Jeff just mentioned, handing out over 1,000 Chromebooks over a short period of time, and figuring out a way to safely deliver that to our students just in time. And then to find out that actually they needed a laptop with different software, and then trying to figure out how to open up more labs on campus and keep those safe. But we're following our health and safety plans, but trying to ensure that our students still get the high quality education, especially given we have a lot of programs that are hands-on in our technical and industrial area and healthcare. But we have figured out a way to at least do some of those virtually, as well as to bring them safely on campus. We've done a couple other things of redeploying our current workforce that we didn't think. For example, food service, where we had to shut that down, we redeployed some of those folks. We closed our campus to the public for the fall, for sure. We'll review where we're at for the spring. We've worked with, as you mentioned, we've worked with a number of our partners to see what they're working on as well, and how they're helping to mitigate some of the spread and what their best practices are. But athletics has been tough. For example, our basketball team practiced at Alverno, so they've had to stop doing that. Our tennis team played at Marquette. We've had to stop doing that as well. So we've had to find alternative ways for our students. The only sport that can continue is our women's tennis right now. And with the basketball, we're hoping that spring we'll be able to do that as well. So those are some of the things. And I have to say, we have a dashboard that tells us when we really need to consider reclosing. So we're following that. We're looking at that on a daily basis. We have a team reviewing what our data systems are in terms of our criteria to determine whether we're going to close or not. And we're already, believe it or not, thinking about spring and what we're going to do and what our policy is going to be around vaccines if we do have one. Is it could be mandatory or not? Looking at testing, we currently don't require mandatory testing of our students because most of them do not live on campus. The average age of our students is 30. They may be doing all kinds of activities, but we're just so far anyway, we're not seeing a rise of cases on campus just yet, but it's early. We just started. We hope we don't see that. We do temperature checks at each of the doors. We really prohibit students from just walking in out any door. We only have certain doors open, and we make sure everyone has a mask and is following the social distancing and protocol. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Mike?
Very similar to our peers, what we've heard from the other institutions. A couple of things. We had to make a number of decisions going into the semester to ensure the health and safety of our campus. And a couple of major things we did. The first thing is to de-densify our residence halls and living on campus, we released our sophomores from the requirement to live on campus. And so that allowed us to really decrease the density of those living in the residence halls. We also allowed students, freshmen included, if they did not want to come to campus, we provided fully online options for them. So again, so we would have less people physically either on campus or in our neighborhoods. And so those are two major decisions that we made to try to help, along with my peers. We doing everything we can to prepare our campus. All of our classrooms and lecture halls have been changed so that we have social distancing. Everyone's required to wear masks. We also, we've really increased our police force is really trying to crack down on, behavior, in the neighborhoods and, off campus. Now hosting parties and things go directly through a student conduct. The students, have taken a pledge to act in certain ways, and when they don't, there's now student conduct that happens because of that. We also, as we developed our plan, that was is my peers. Our plans were all had to be approved by the Milwaukee's health department. Testing was an important part of that. We originally had planned to do 1,250 tests a week on campus ourselves, but as it turned out, the supply chain of reagents in the Midwest became a challenge. Particularly, it's getting a little better now, but at the time we were opening, it was really difficult to get the amount of reagents we need. So we had to partner with a freighter and another private firm to get the tests we need. And so we're at the point now where we are testing. Certainly anyone who is symptomatic is tested. And then we're also testing anyone that they have been in contact with that are asymptomatic. We will be increasing the number of asymptomatic tests that we provide based on the fact that we now can get more reagents for the PCR tests that Mark mentioned. And as what Vicki mentioned, we also have a dashboard we monitor every day. There's a gating process that we've worked through with MCW and Freightert to help us make decisions about the future, and ultimately, if we would ever have to go all online, that gating process is used for that. So again, I think we're all in a very similar boat. We've all disrupted our operations and are doing things completely different. But I think that hopefully all of us are hoping and praying that we can keep the number of cases on our campuses to a minimum. We don't have any huge outbreaks.
So one of the things that I've heard is sort of growing frustration among students with having to deal with COVID-19, and their belief that because they are younger, they're not immune, but they will be, asymptomatic or a lot less impacted, and that they just want to get it over with. So actually, there are many students that want to get the disease and get through it. Are you hearing that on your campuses? And that runs obviously very different from older adults who are going to great extremes to avoid social contact. So how do you meld those two positions together? Mark?
That's the tension that exists, and it really comes to a head on college campuses, David. Exactly the debate that we're having, where some people, and it's not just some of the college students, there's some people in the community that have argued the same thing. 18 to 25-year-olds, the statistics are in their favor. The problem is they're not in a bubble, and that's the tension that we have, because our employees have to interact. It's whether it's faculty and staff and others, and it's our communities as well. It's the grocery stores, it's the dry cleaner, it's all those businesses, it's restaurants. That's the big problem, and that's why you see in the New York Times tally across. If you haven't seen that report, yesterday you see 7 communities in Wisconsin that are among the top 20 metro areas in the nation, and they all have a UW campus. And that's the problem, is that you have these hot spots, and then that bleeds over into the communities. So I think for the safety of all, what we're trying to do is create a culture where I've put videos together. We've had students that have put videos together that address this directly, that say, look, you're 19 years old. You might feel that you're invulnerable, that this won't affect you, but you don't know about that compromised, that immune compromised student next to you. You don't know about that faculty member and what he or she, if exposed, brings home to their family. So that's that culture, again, we're trying to create. You can't have it both ways. The concept of herd immunity isn't going to work in a way that's going to be safe for all. So.
Okay, Jeff?
Just to add one quick thing to that, a yes and comment. Yes, we've probably all heard the narrative that you said. The thing that surprised me is, and our students are known for being very empathetical. I got just as many comments from students in town halls and our Q&As asking us point blank, what are you doing to protect our faculty? So as much as we've heard about the levels of responsible behavior amongst students, some of them are concerned with the faculty that they really value. And that's a piece that actually surprised me, that they were very blunt, very specific. They wanted to know how we were protecting the faculty.
Yeah, great. Vicki?
Yeah, I'd also like to say that as an institution with the majority of students of color, along with many staff members, there are health disparities that actually put them more at risk. And so we have to be very mindful of their concerns and why some students don't feel that they can come on campus, and why we really felt the need to offer more virtual classes for them, or at least to offer them some alternatives so that they don't need to come to campus given the health disparities in our region.
Thank you. So let me move on to the next question, and that's, in addition to COVID-19, our country is dealing with social injustice, systemic racism, and the related civil unrest. So what are you doing to anticipate and deal with these issues? Do you expect protesting? We had protests in Milwaukee as recently as yesterday. What about opposition to protests? And what about investigating and addressing the existence of racism on your campus by professors, teachers, staff, and even students? It's a big question. Who'd like to go first? Mike?
I guess I can start here, and just so you know, do you expect protesting? Well, we've already had a lot of protesting. For those, we had our first rally around these issues back in August, and we've subsequently had the day after the Bucks sat out their game against in the first round. Our students protested the next morning in solidarity with the Bucks, and they subsequently, went out and blocked Wisconsin Avenue for a couple of hours, and then ended up coming into the administrative building where I'm housed to continue their protest. And so I just think that this is kind of the world we're going to be living in. And again, our campuses are microcosms of the broader society. So issues around racial justice are very, very important to our students, and they want to be very active. So I think all of us, have to be very cognizant of that. And that group that rallied in the administration building, I went down and addressed them, and we agreed to come back the following week and to agree to a set of action items, which we ultimately came to agreement with last Thursday. And I think it's very important, again, for us to recognize that people are looking for action, and they're looking for action now. They're tired of waiting. We talked about this being the now generation. The group of students on our campus want us to address these issues, not just on our campuses, but they want us to use our positions in institutions of authority to make change, whether it be changes to policing, to changes in systems that exist within the city of Milwaukee, to the broader systems in our country. And so, I think about one of the things that I've done, back in June, I launched a commission on race and equity. It's being co-led by Dr. Howard Fuller and Christopher Pay, from a former trustee and officer at We Energies, to really help us address, issues on our campus, develop to not only systemic racism of the processes we have in place, but also looking at those microaggressions and those things that maybe our faculty and students of color face, and how we can ensure that those issues are mitigated and people actually face consequences for their behaviors. And hopefully our goal is to help everyone learn and, kind of listen to the faculty students of color on our campus, to what they're experiencing and how we can make their experiences better by many times of our own actions. So I think, again, this is something, as we think about going forward in the future, this is something important for all of our campuses to address.
Thank you. Vicki, would you like to go?
Yes. Well, as I mentioned, we're one of the most diverse two-year college in the state. I think we have a special responsibility for leadership in this area. We've spent a lot of time and energy in the past talking about some of these issues, but not really addressing them, just as Mike just talked about. I think it's that time of action of what we've seen recently, and most recently with Jacob Blake and Kenosha. I think that it's really pushed the envelope with everybody. You see it nationally, and of course you see it in our community as well. We are really trying to close the equity gap. That's certainly part of it, but it's more than that. It's an equity statement that we recently adopted that really talks about the awareness training and those crucial conversations we really need to hold about our unconscious and implicit or explicit biases, and to create that inclusive, welcoming environment where folks feel they belong. We have a new student experience statement around there. We've brought in a number of speakers recently. I've reached out to an organization that we just joined. It's called Achieving the Dream, around building the equity agenda for us and closing that gap, and to really talk about having the conversation. One of the reasons that we are really interested in that Moonshot for Equity through HERA is one of the technical support pieces was to have some leadership development for our college, all of our colleges and universities in HERA and in our communities around this very topic. Racial justice is something we must talk about, and we have to have the humility to really listen carefully to what's being said, and we do need to take some action. Our criminal justice program, for example, has really stepped up and looked at the curriculum and have additionally added ethics and complicit bias and cultural competency to their curriculum. And there's so many more things that we absolutely need to do for our students and for our institutions to really be on the right path to keep moving forward in the way that our community needs and deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mark?
Yeah, I would add a little bit to what Drs. Martin and Lovell have addressed. And I have to tell you, we can all learn from each other, and these are great perspectives. And I think this is a journey that at UWM, as the largest campus with, in terms of four-year campuses with diversity in the state of Wisconsin on every possible dimension, we've been at this for decades. We're an access university as well as a research university, but I'll also tell you what we've done is not enough. And the conviction and the expectation around accountability and results has absolutely stepped up over the last year. We've added at least a half a dozen major programmatic endeavors to things that we've already had in place. So we have a comprehensive diversity, equity, and inclusion framework today that has over 25 different major areas. And those were really sharply focused and enhanced by a series of listening sessions that we held this summer. We had students, diverse students, share their perspectives. We had faculty and staff. And through these listening sessions, we really explored a lot of issues. They weren't easy conversations, but they're continuing. And they've really informed us about things that historically, let's take an issue that maybe many listeners can appreciate. We've all talked about the importance of diversity. We've all talked about what we're doing. But oftentimes, if you look at the racial makeup, if you look at the ethnicity in our management, on our boards, in our classrooms, and across the organizations that we represent, we haven't moved that needle enough. And there's often good reasons, the pipeline or expense or just a number of things that we've looked at and we say, well, this is why we haven't diversified as fully as we need to. But oftentimes you have to stand back and say, if we don't change our behaviors, we're going to be the same exact way. We're going to operate the same, we're going to have the same culture, and we're going to look the same. So we've put some stakes in the ground, and we are today working on anti-racism, anti-bias training that's mandatory for our faculty, staff, and students. We are putting in place changes in our staff hiring, as well as our faculty and administrative hiring and promotion practices that are really representative of more diverse, accountable selection and promotion criteria and who's actually in what seats. We're undertaking, as I've mentioned before, the Moonshot for Equity. We've recently signed the pledge for the Region of Choice designation, joining both MATC and the Medical College of Wisconsin, which will position us in 5 years to have 25% more employees of color and 15% more leaders of color than where we are today. So these are tangible actions, very much like what you've heard today. I've allocated over $100,000 in mini grants to help us change our culture to address the types of ways we can be more inclusive and engaging. We've got a number of other actions in place. I also commissioned and announced a new UWM history book, and it's to recognize the importance, the contributions that will be showcased around diversity on a number of different dimensions. So this is going to be a major recognition and celebration ultimately of everything that's happened on our campus over many decades from diverse lens. So there's a lot of things in place, and critically important to have our ear to the ground. And as Mike Lovell said, really take the critical actions that are needed today.
Thank you. Jeff.
So we started doing this work in earnest about 3 years ago with a series of listening sessions with our students. That led to many things. It led first to a committee on campus to do the work of equity and inclusion. We then developed a biannual campus climate survey and learned quite a bit about our students and their experiences through that. That's something that MyEd had never done before. That work led to hiring our first full-time director of equity and inclusion last year and the creation of a center around that. And that person was tasked with developing a one-year action plan, which we wrapped up over the summer. And then during the course of that work, to develop a 3-year, more long-range plan tied to our overall strategic plan. As we got ready to release that plan this summer, we were in the middle of all of the turmoil happening out on our streets in our cities. So we took a pause. We reached out to organizations in the community like the YWCA, Milwaukee Fellows, and LIT to make sure that we had other eyes on our plan, acknowledging what our colleagues have said here in this discussion, that the leadership on our campus is predominantly white. A lot of the people doing the work are white, and we had to make sure that we had the right language, we had the right focus, we had the right purpose. In that 3-year plan moving forward, we've done everything from creating a $10,000 matching fund for our students, faculty, staff, and alumni who support agencies doing that work in Milwaukee. We match their charitable donations. We're working to diversify the faculty and staff, as others have mentioned. We've put in place compulsory anti-racism training for all of our faculty, staff, and students. That's underway this fall. What your question asks of all of us, David, is, in a way, it reminds us that COVID is not the issue. COVID is the impediment to all of the other work that we have to do. And one thing that I think our business community, our campus supporters are going to see in the future is that our campuses have to have these conversations. And for some of our supporters, they're going to think that we're traveling outside of our lane by not simply focusing on the curriculum or not simply focusing on job preparedness. And I think for some of our supporters, that is going to be a challenge. Are they still welcome on our campuses? Are they still part of our community? So we need to do this work in a broad way, in a way that is equitable, inclusive, and happens. The umbrella under which I'm living right now, and I'm sure my other colleagues are living, is the saying that we hear, that white silence equals violence. So many of our students, many of the folks that work within our organizations are looking for us to provide some voice here.
Well, thank you. We've covered a lot of ground today, and I think our community is very fortunate to have all 4 of you with your skills, knowledge, leadership, and hard work leading the institutions that you do lead and benefiting the students in our community, which leads to benefiting the business community and the overall quality of life we have here. I do have one question that was submitted by John Kissinger that I'd like to read, and that is, public aid to universities has become a political issue with concern about cancel culture limiting academic freedom and liberal ideology being taught. This threatens our great university system. What can the business community do to fight this trend? So that might be for Mike Lovell and Mark Mone. Certainly Mark, as a public university in particular.
Happy to take a crack at this. Number one, I think I think the business community can continue to advocate for both sides of this debate. I think that's critical. In other words, it's not that the left is, there's liberal leanings and there's conservative leanings. We really need to have both. That's what campus is. If we can't have that debate on campuses, the end is in sight. We really have to have that freedom of expression. Number two, please recognize that there's a lot of rhetoric. This is, especially in today's world, there's a lot of ideology on the left and on the right that oftentimes overlooks the truth, and that is engage with your campus, engage with faculty, staff, and administration, and really understand, do your homework, and see what's being taught. What we're trying to do in most campus environments, and I don't care if this is four-year public or private or two-year technical, we really want students to have a basis in competencies around critical thinking, around communication, around understanding history, and being able to position individuals for lifelong learning, really be able to understand, to be a critical consumer of knowledge. The final comment is, this has got to be, let's keep politics out of this. I made a comment earlier about the defunding of education in the state of Wisconsin. This is a real sad commentary. If you look at the latest IPEDS data, it's very concerning to see this disinvestment. We can't allow this to continue to be a political issue from the right or from the left. We have to look at this in the context of the workplace. We have to look at this in the context of the livelihoods of a lot of individuals who will not be able to move ahead without education. We know it's the path to the future for so many individuals. So that's my first crack.
All right, thank you. I have one more question. And this went through my mind also during the course of this interview. So the question is, I love and appreciate your leadership and the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, looking at this panel and thinking about representation, how do you as leaders feel about the lacking representation of people of color in your types of leadership roles? Milwaukee is a majority city, yet here we are with 4 leaders of major higher eds on this panel, and 3 or 4 are white men. How does that make you feel? Where do you see yourself in your leadership evolving into the future to allow for greater, more equitable representation in these leadership roles? Jeff?
I'll start. Well, it's obvious. It's something that I mentioned when I talked about our equity and inclusion plan, that we were aware of that internally. This year, we decided to suspend most of our faculty searches and participate in a national fellowship program that is available to people of color. So for our faculty, it's one way that we're going to be able to broaden the diversity within our faculty. That same national organization is now creating a program for faculty who want to move into leadership, and it will be available exclusively to people of color as well. So on the national level, with ACAD, the Association of Independent Colleges of Art and Design, they're tackling that problem directly, and MyEd is proud to belong to that program, and we are going to utilize the equity programs they're developing to diversify both our faculty and our leadership.
Okay, thank you. Vicki?
Yes, I always like Eleanor Roosevelt's quote, use privilege to sow justice. I think for me, it's if I'm in this position right now, what am I doing to ensure that succession planning is in place, and that, as Jeff just mentioned, we have the leadership development ready to go, and that we are really reaching out to diverse leaders across the country, once I leave this position and on my cabinet, to really expand the number of folks who can really add the diversity that we really need at our institution. So important for students, employees to, especially for students in classrooms, to be able to see someone who looks like them in the classroom, so that they can see what is possible and have a role model in place.
Thank you. Mike?
So I think we all have to recognize that this is obviously is a challenge and something we need to work on. And the only way we're really going to get to this is by structurally changing the way we do things and the processes we have in place, and to understand, why we're getting the outcomes we are getting. And so when we think about, for example, how do we increase the number of faculty of color on our campus 20%? Well, over the last 4 years, we've done a clustering hiring. So any faculty that retired comes back locally, and then as we put them back out to the campus, if they don't hire a diverse candidate, then they will not get the position. We think about the way we hire senior leaders on the campus to ensure that the processes we are using will get us the most diverse pools of candidates out there. And again, going back to Vicki, think about succession planning. I'm really proud of the fact that we have our first provost of color on this campus, in our history, and hopefully we can do more of that type of hiring at the highest levels of the university, including hopefully someday a president at Marquette University. But again, we have to, I think, all have to recognize that the former systems we had in place were not getting the outcomes we wanted in terms of diverse candidates. So we have to fundamentally change the way we do things. And I think there's a lot of good, best practices out there that we can look through, whether it be HR, whether it be training for individuals, so that we can have diverse, faculty and others on campus become future leaders of our campuses. But again, this is not going to change overnight. I think we all need to recognize, and we think about how we populate our boards, we think about how we populate, the senior leaders that are around us, just ensuring that we always do so looking at as diverse a lens as possible.
Thank you, Mike. Mark?
I'll be brief. I know we're at time end. It's a really important question, and I thank the person for asking it. I mentioned a couple of things that we have underway. We've recognized this issue at UWM, and we have today joined the Region of Choice initiative that has very specific goals to help address exactly this issue. We've also put in place to support that changes with regard to how we hire and how we promote. And I think if you look at this, it really addresses many of the comments that have been made about what are the things that we're going to do to expect different outcomes. I couldn't agree more with Mike. You can't, if everybody in higher ed and in all organizations seeks to diversify further, we have to look at the realities of the pipeline. And we don't have enough PhDs in areas where you think about the typical ways that we move forward. We don't have enough people. And so what are we doing to seed the future? What are we doing to encourage diverse applicants from high school and college to enter? So there's a long game here, as well as where we recruit from. What are we doing to partner with HBCUs, the historically Black colleges and universities? What are we doing to set up specific programs where we have talent of color on our campus that we support to get degrees, advanced degrees, and then come back, kind of like what the ROTC uses, or other types of programs where we have sponsored programs. So we have a series of actions like that, but this doesn't change things tomorrow, but give us 3 years, 5 years, 10 years with actions in place today that are looking to address that.
Well, thank you. And again, I want to thank all four of you for your vision, your leadership. This has been a time of great change, and based on everything you've said, we will continue to see lots of change on college campuses. And I feel we're on a great trend here in our community. So with that, I also want to thank Brianna and Amy for their reports, and all the callers, the GMC members who called in to listen today. I think we all learned quite a bit. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 12th. We look forward to seeing you then. And today's meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.